I'm on a mission to use every single dog Pokemon in a solo run to definitively answer the question, who is Pokemon's top dog? Last time I started off this series in Fire Red with the original puppy Pokemon, Growlithe. And today, we'll be jumping into Johto to see if you can beat Pokemon HeartGold with just a Snubbull. Before we get started, let's do a quick overview of our pink bulldog and see what we're actually getting ourselves into. While most people didn't have the fairy Pokemon on their radar until it actually became a fairy Pokemon in Gen 6, this little guy had a fair amount going for it, even back when it was a normal type. Taking a look at stats, base 80 attack makes it one of the hardest hitting Pokepups in this video series, and should serve us pretty well in the later stages of the game. And it'll need to serve us well to make up for Snubbull's fairly mediocre defenses, and more importantly, its abysmal base 30 speed. The Johto games aren't necessarily full of fast Pokemon, but by the end game, our lackluster speed may end up being a major issue. Onto moves, Snubbull having access to both Bite and Headbutt early on will prove very handy, as Steel is the only type to resist both in Gen 4. Luckily, we won't be seeing any of them for quite some time. Snubbull also levels up Bite into Crunch later in the game, and can even relearn the Elemental Fangs through the use of a Heart Scale, which may prove extremely helpful for certain Pokemon in the endgame. And while Takedown is a bit disappointing for our strongest normal attack, a quick look at Snubbull's TM list reveals Return, which will be a very powerful and very reliable move once we have access to it. In addition, Snubbull gets other great TMs such as Dig and eventually Earthquake, utility moves like Substitute, Rest, and Sleep Talk, and a wide variety of special attacking coverage, although we may not be opting for those very often, if at all. Furthermore, just like our good boy Growlithe, Snubbull gets access to the amazing ability Intimidate, which can help beef up our defenses just a touch, albeit only against the first Pokemon. Lastly, unlike Growlithe, Snubbull is in the fast experience group, so we'll be leveling up pretty quickly over the course of the game. And this will be that much more apparent since we're in Johto, a region notorious for lacking high levels. Until the post-game, that is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's not waste any more time and jump into the run. We name ourselves Shepsky, spawn into Sentience, and spend way too long choosing a window type. We make our way to Professor Elm's lab, choose Snubbull for the starter, and nickname her Cherry, because she reminds me of cherry blossom trees. She ends up being a quirky nature, meaning no stats lowered, no stats raised. And honestly, I'll take it. Adamant or Jolly would have been the best case scenario, but I'm not one to look a gift dog in the mouth. For this early section of the game, Cherry is actually quite powerful. Our base 80 attack is notably higher than what any starter begins with, and is even on par with their middle evolutions. Well, excluding Bayleaf. Sorry, Bayleaf. This early dominance can be seen clearly in our first rival fight as we breeze past him without any trouble. I gave the rival Cyndaquil as I figured it would be the most challenging for us to overcome, for reasons I'll explain later. As we make our way back to Elm's lab, we get stopped by this police officer who assumes we were the ones who stole the Pokemon because, and I quote, "Rule number 1, whoever did it will come back to the site." Really? That's the number 1 rule? Thankfully, an 11-year-old girl comes by and tells him it's not us, and he believes her. What a competent officer. After proving our innocence, we name our rival... Oh shit, I forgot to think of a name. Catcher. You know, like dog catcher. Or maybe, as in catching these hands! Before heading out of town, we head back home and tell Mom to save some money for us, which is obviously going to be worth it. The road to Violet City is uneventful, as is Sprout Tower. In this early section, we learn Bite at level 7 and Lick at level 13. Now, even though we don't need Lick at all, I decide to teach it over Tail Whip, because what are the odds we'll need Tail Whip anytime soon? After heading to the top of Sprout Tower and fighting Elder Lee, we make our way to Violet Gym and take on our first gym leader, Falkner. We enter the battle at level 14 as he leads off with his level 9 Pidgey. As expected, it goes down without much trouble to 2 consecutive bites. Then he brings in his level 13 Pidgeotto. While Gust doesn't do a ton to us, we deal under half his health with Bite. And then Falkner starts to use Roost. Because we can't deal a ton of damage, Falkner is able to consistently stall us out by spam healing, while slowly whittling us down with more attacks. If only I had a move to help us get around this situation. Eventually, Falkner's strategy of spamming Roost pays off for him and we get knocked out. Okay, not a great showing against the gym leader I've literally made fun of for being trash. Let's try that again. On the next attempt, we knock out Pidgey just like before, but not before it lowers our accuracy with Mud Slap. Oh joy. And while things seem to be going the same way against Pidgeotto as they did on the first attempt, Falkner fortunately decides to forego healing, and with Cherry squinting past her lowered accuracy, we're luckily able to knock out Pidgeotto, surviving its attacks on just 6 HP. Let this be a lesson to you all. Status moves aren't always the most helpful, but they're worth keeping over weak attacks like Lick that offer next to no benefit. Before we head out of the city, we stop by the Pokemart to pick up a gift from Mom that we didn't want, as well as the egg from Elm's assistant. Make your guesses now on what it's gonna be. Just like the road to Violet City, the path to Azalea is also uneventful, especially considering the number of trainers I'm skipping so as to not heavily overlevel Cherry. When we get to Azalea, we meet an old man who jumps down a well for the sake of some Slowpoke. So we follow him down there and wipe out Team Rocket in the process. Specifically Proton, who is often labeled as the scariest and cruelest guy in Team Rocket. Well, if you were that negative, you would be named Electron. Once the well is cleared out, we make our way through Azalea Gym to face the second gym leader, Bugsy. We enter the fight at level 19, which was right in time to learn our new strongest attack, Headbutt. But despite our new stab, I was a bit worried going into this fight. And as it turns out, I was right to be worried, because Scyther immediately crits us with U-turn and knocks us out in a single hit. Sick. I decide to try the fight again, but even without the turn 1 crit, two things are very apparent. First, the move U-turn itself is a big problem. Every time Scyther uses U-turn, it'll switch out to either Metapod or Kakuna. Keep in mind, because of Intimidate, Scyther's first U-turn will always be at -1 attack. But since Intimidate only works at the start of battle, every U-turn after this will be doing more damage. Plus, since he's faster, every time Scyther switches out, he's getting a free hit on us while taking no damage himself. And that leads me to the second issue. Headbutt is a 3-hit KO. It's already hard enough to get an attack off on Scyther while it's constantly switching out, but even if it doesn't use U-turn, every other move it can use poses a risk in some way, meaning the odds of getting 3 clean hits without fainting ourselves is quite difficult. After a few more failed attempts, I battle the rest of Buggy the Clown. After a few more failed attempts, I fight the rest of Bugsy's gym trainers and try again at level 20. On this first attempt, Scyther goes straight for a Leer, and we go straight for Headbutt and get a crit, knocking Scyther out in one hit. Thinking back on that first battle with Bugsy, I'd say we earned this one. With Scyther gone, the rest of the fight is absolutely free. Given that Bugsy is only the second gym leader, I'm fine with getting lucky in this fight as it helps us avoid heavy overleveling now. It may happen later, but for now, we're doing alright. With that done, we go to leave Azalea Town, but not before getting into our second rival fight. Now on one hand, our rival catcher may have been an easier battle than Bugsy, and you can argue that we should have fought him first. And while that may be the case, there's one thing about our rival that makes him a bit more of a threat. Curse. Catcher's first Pokemon is Ghastly, and since we're a slow little bulldog, he's basically guaranteed to get off a Curse before we knock him out. Curse does a quarter of our HP at the end of every turn, and with one of those being the turn we knock out Ghastly, we have to knock out both his Quilava and Zubat in no more than 3 turns. And with his Quilava both outspeeding us and surviving a Headbutt, winning within this turn limit just isn't going to happen. Or, you can get a critical hit on Quilava in your very next attempt, making the rest of the battle an easy win. Look, I know this makes 2 important battles in a row that we've won thanks to a crit, but for one, they happened without me fishing for them, and 2, like I mentioned, I'd rather get some good luck than overlevel. We're already 3 levels above Whitney's Miltank, and we still have to make it all the way to Goldenrod. And if it makes you feel better, Azaleas are somewhat tied to luck and good fortune, so it's fitting that we get the crits here of all towns. From here we head into Ilex Forest and play tag with Farfetch to get the HM for Cut. And while searching for a Pokemon to learn it, our egg starts to hatch. And it's... a Togepi. Obviously. What, did you expect something else? Anyways, we make our way through Ilex Forest, impress a kimono girl with how smart our dog is, and meet up with Lyra at the daycare, who goes well out of her way to emphasize that we are not together. I mean, yeah, true, but you didn't have to be so rude about it. Despite Goldenrod having a lot to do, there's not a lot here for us at this moment, so we head to the radio tower, win our radio card, and make our way over to Whitney's gym. At this point, Cherry is level 23, which means we get the joy of having to press B after every single level in order to keep her from evolving. This doesn't impact anything, but it's a minor inconvenience for me, and I thought you should know that. Speaking of inconveniences, time to face Whitney. As you might expect, her first Pokemon Clefairy really isn't an issue. It lives our Headbutt on a sliver of HP, but thanks to a lucky flinch, we're able to move on to Miltank with full health. As for this Demon Cow, one thing we have going for us is Cherry being a girl, meaning we don't need to play around with Infatuation luck from Attract. However, we do have to play around with flinch luck, as Miltank outspeeds us and usually goes for Stomp, which has a 30% chance to flinch, just like Headbutt. While this isn't impossible to overcome, the potential to not move along with the damage slowly racking up means Miltank is able to knock us out without much trouble. I decide to gain one more level off the remaining gym trainers and give the fight another try. But this time, I have a trick up my sleeve. I decide to heed my own advice from back in Violet City, and once Miltank comes in, I go for Charm. By lowering Miltank's attack, I give myself more opportunities to get off a headbutt, and if I do get flinched, it's not nearly as damaging as it would be otherwise. With this new strategy, along with some very average flinch luck, we're just barely able to knock out Miltank on 11 HP, earning us the plain badge. Or at least it would, if Whitney didn't throw a hissy fit and refuse to give it to us. Wait, you're saying she always cries when she loses? Who the hell gave her this position in the first place? A pleasure doing business, I guess. On our way out of town, we stop by the barber and give Cherry a haircut for a job well done, and pick up another gift from Mom. That we didn't want. As we're leaving Goldenrod, I hear a faint cheering off in the distance. Maybe I'll go check it out. Ah yes, the Pokéathlon! The pinnacle of Pokemon performance. I can feel it all coming back to me. The games, the glory, oh how it beckons for me, how I must heed its call, how I must— No, you must not get sucked in again. You would not wish this life upon Cherry, would you? Say no to the Pokéathlon. Do it for Cherry. Where was I? Oh yeah. As we take our dog for a walk throughout National Park, we come across a very helpful TM, Dig. Along with our core moves of Headbutt and Bite, acquiring Dig means we can hit every possible Pokemon for neutral or super effective damage. Well, except for Skarmory, but I don't know of a single trainer in this entire game that even has a Skarmory. We leave the peaceful National Park and head over to the Sudowoodo tree and— How do I always forget the squirt bottle? We use the squirt bottle on Sudowoodo, knock out that son of a birch, and head into Ecruteak City. I go straight into the burned tower, meet a man dressed up as a magician who is apparently not a magician, okay, rude, and jump into our third rival fight with Catcher. Now feels like a good time to bring up why I chose Cyndaquil for the rival. I figured that the fire starter would not only consistently outspeed me, but that the potential for accuracy drops from Smokescreen and burn from his fire moves would be more annoying than what either of the other starters could do. But yeah, I kind of forgot about the TM for Dig when doing that, so maybe I accidentally chose the easiest starter for the rival. Either way, Catcher really isn't that threatening, so if I made him a touch easier in the long run, oh well. Regardless, we end up defeating him, stop Cherry from evolving, say hello to the legendary beasts in the basement, making the fake magician jealous, and move on to the gym to face Morty. Despite us being a normal type going into a ghost type gym, there's a few big things we need to watch out for. For one, 3 of his 4 Pokemon know Curse, and as we saw against our rival earlier, that can very easily spell out defeat for Cherry. But even more of an issue is one of his Haunters and his Gengar knowing Hypnosis. Not to mention, the Haunter knows Dream Eater. While it is fairly inaccurate, getting hit with Hypnosis pretty much seals our fate as we're basically a sitting duck. Oh, sorry, sitting dog. And with Johto being full of apricorn trees instead of berry trees, it's not like we can just equip a Chesto Berry going into the battle, right? Well, actually, if we head back to Violet City, there's a guy outside the Pokemon Center who will trade us berries for shards. And luckily, these games make it really easy to get shards. By using Rock Smash in Violet City, which we can get the HM for on the outskirts of town, we have a 50-50 chance to get an item each time we break a rock. This includes revives, max ethers, and you guessed it, shards. After smashing a bit of rocks, we collect a ton of berries, including Citrus, Lum, and Chesto. I know Lum would work too, but trust me, those are better saved for later. With our failsafe against Hypnosis equipped, we head back to Ecruteak to face Morty. And well, wouldn't you know that all that effort wasn't really necessary. After a couple of attempts, we get a run where Ghastly goes for Spite instead of Curse on the first turn, and we one-shot it with Bite. Next in is his first of 2 Haunters, this one having Hypnosis and Dream Eater. But thanks to that pesky thing called Accuracy, his Hypnosis misses, and we once again one-shot with Bite. Then comes Gengar, and not only does he go for Mean Lick, ew, gross. Then comes Gengar, and not only does he go for Mean Look the first turn, which is absolutely useless, but the following turn he also misses Hypnosis, begging the question, why did I even get a Chesto Berry? Last in is his final Haunter, which uses Sucker Punch, doing nowhere near enough damage to knock us out, and one more bite finishes the match. Look, at the very least, I did try and implement some strategy. The odds that one hypnosis would have missed is very likely, but I really wish we could have had that moment of, "Wow, Shep, that was such a great strategy. You're so smart and cool." Oh well, maybe later in the video. After our victory, we swing by the Pokemart to pick up another gift from Mom, yet another we have no use for, and head into the dance theater to stop this rocket grunt who I'm about 99% sure is drunk. "Stop dancing such a serious dance. Show me something like a hula dance."
Huh? You telling me you don't respect what the customer wants?
Well then I'll show you how to dance. I'll show you a great one. So we agree, right? He's definitely drunk. After sending him packing, we head west out of Ecruteak and head into Olivine City. And after meeting Amphi and Jasmine at the top of the lighthouse, we sail across the sea to Sionwood City, which I'll be the first to say, I don't know if this qualifies as a city. Once we arrive, we say hi to Suicune, beat up the fraud magician, stop Cherry from evolving, again, and head into Sionwood Gym to face Chuck. As the only gym with a positive offensive matchup against us, along with Chuck having 2 fully evolved beasts at his disposal, it's safe to say I was a bit worried going into this fight. But luckily, all the hours of Chuck dumping water on his head seem to have stunted his strategy, as the only fighting move he has on either Pokemon is Focus Punch, meaning as long as we're constantly attacking, we won't get utterly destroyed. We enter the fight at level 35 as Chuck starts off with Primeape. Luckily, thanks to Chuck going for Double Team on the first turn and our Intimidate lowering his attack, we're able to get past Primeape without taking too much damage. Then comes Poliwrath. He goes straight for Body Slam, doing a decent chunk of damage, as we do roughly a quarter with Headbutt. On the following turn we get hit with Surf, which we barely survive on 1 HP. Then Chuck proceeds to do quite literally the most disrespectful thing that has ever been done to me by an NPC. He could have just used Body Slam or Surf again to finish the fight, but instead this man goes for Hypnosis to put us asleep, and then absolutely obliterates us with Focus Punch the turn after. Jesus, dude, overkill much? Despite this embarrassing loss, I decided to give Chuck another attempt. This time, thanks to his Primeape going for the combination of Double Team followed up by a Focus Punch, we're able to quickly move on to Poliwrath with full HP. He goes straight for a Body Slam, and while he does immediately get the paralysis, the Lumberry we equipped this time cures it for us. Would have rather used that on Hypnosis, but I guess that's fine. We continue whittling each other down, leaving Cherry on just 11 HP, as we get extremely close to knocking him out with a critical hit. Unfortunately, close doesn't quite cut it, and Chuck uses a Hyper Potion to heal up. Just like before, I want to emphasize either a Body Slam or Surf and we're done for. But that's not good enough for Chuck, and instead we get one of the craziest sequences I've ever experienced. Hypnosis, miss. Next Hypnosis, lands. Poliwrath goes for Focus Punch, I get a first turn Wake, hit him, and break his focus. Then Chuck heals again. At this point I've run out of Headbutt PP and have to use Dig, as Chuck is hell-bent on winning this battle with a Focus Punch. So hell-bent that despite being able to win with either of his other attacking moves, he quite literally throws the match by letting us slowly whittle him down. Chuck? More like choke. Guess all those waterfalls to the head did a number on your critical thinking abilities, huh pal? Just like the cherry blossoms she's named after, Cherry is proving to be one of the luckiest pups I've ever seen. On our way out of the city, we pick up the secret potion and head back to the lighthouse to deliver it to Jasmine. Quick side note, I know it's been over 20 years since Gold and Silver were released, but I feel like the Johto games deserve more praise for the varying events and cutscenes that they introduced. Things like this Medicine Fetch quest, chasing down Farfetch'd, Gyarados at the Lake of Rage, and even all the interactions with the Kimono Girls did a great job of giving the player more to do than just beating gym after gym. Even if it's pretty underwhelming by standards nowadays, all these side quests really stepped up things from Gen 1, and I for one appreciate that. Anyways, now that Amphi is healed, we can face Jasmine. And well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that both of our Magnemites are no trouble at all thanks to Dig. But the bad news, despite having a super effective attack for it, we just don't deal enough damage to Steelix. Even implementing the same strategy with Charm that we did against Whitney, because of Steelix's Citrus Berry, along with Jasmine healing her with a Hyper Potion, we aren't able to deal enough damage before we're eventually taken out ourselves. I tried this fight a few times, but without unrealistic luck with her missing and us landing crits, it just doesn't seem feasible at our current level. Not that this should be a big surprise, as Steelix has the second highest defense out of any Pokemon at this point in the franchise. Instead of trying my luck again and again, or even gaining a few extra levels, I decide to shelve this fight for the time being and head east of Ecruteak towards Mahogany Town. After all, despite Price being the 7th gym leader, his levels aren't that far off from Jasmine or Chuck. But before we make our way to Mahogany, we take a quick detour back to Goldenrod. At this point IRL, I'm playing on Sunday, which is the one day a week you can head into the Goldenrod department store and receive the TM for return if you have a Pokemon with high enough friendship. And since we've been using Snubbull for the whole damn playthrough, we're able to get it. With that done, we make our way to Mahogany Town, head north to the Lake of Rage to knock out this sickly looking Gyarados, and meet a man who surely got his Dragonite via legal means. We meet back up with him in Mahogany Town where he murders a man with Hyper Beam and leads us into Team Rocket's secret base. We make our way through the area, fight alongside this man's totally legal level 40 Dragonite, and once done, head into Mahogany Gym to fight Price. With our newly acquired return, he isn't too difficult of a gym leader to get past. You know, unless Piloswine's evasion boost from Snowcloak screws you over, or if you get frozen from Blizzard. You know, just a hypothetical. Once we beat Price, we stop Cherry from evolving again and make our way back to Olivine to give Jasmine another attempt. But on our way there, we stop by the Pokemart again and pick up a gift from Mom. However, this time, our mom actually bought us something we wanted, the Silk Scarf. This held item boosts the power of normal type moves by 20%. And also, according to Bulbapedia, apparently boosts the holder's confusion damage by 20%. Never knew that before. But see, I told you it was worth it to have Mom save money. Little did I know I could have just bought one from the game corner for 1,000 coins, but I digress. We make it back to Olivine Gym to give Jasmine another attempt, and thanks to the levels we gained back in Mahogany Town, along with a bit of good luck, this time we're just barely able to get past her Steelix, earning us the Mineral Badge. From here we get a call from Professor Elm about some shady shit in Goldenrod and head on over to check it out. Overall, most of the battles in this section of the game are fairly uneventful. That is, until we come face to face with our rival. I mentioned toward the beginning that Cherry's speed might come back to bite us, and it's around this point in the game that this idea really starts to take root. None of Catcher's Pokemon are that threatening on their own, but being slower than almost all of them can prove to be a bit of a headache. Golbat can use Confuse Ray, causing us to hit ourselves. Quilava can either lower our accuracy with Smokescreen or even burn us with a fire attack. Magnemite can paralyze us if we miss our attack thanks to Smokescreen. And Haunter can hit us with Curse, further whittling down our HP. Not to mention, we have to outlast every attack that comes our way, which can get really dicey by the time we get to the end of the fight. In fact, the successful attempt I did have ended with Cherry paralyzed on 1 HP. So safe to say, our slow speed is really starting to catch up to us. Or I guess, slow us down. Anyways, the rest of the Team Rocket section goes by without much trouble, because Team Rocket sucks. And we're able to head past this endeavor, go east of Mahogany Town to Ice Path, and eventually reach Blackthorn City. And oh boy. If you thought any gym fight up until now was really challenging, I'd like to introduce you to Claire. Now, I knew Claire would be difficult, but I had no idea how difficult she would be. The biggest issue by far is her first Pokemon, Gyarados. Not Gyarados itself, but its ability, Intimidate. Having to go through this entire fight at 2/3 of Cherry's normal attack stat is quite the tall order, despite having an over 10 level advantage. Plus, thanks to Cherry's low speed, every single Pokemon on her team outspeeds us, and we take way too much damage to tank all the hits coming our way. Even by the time we get past Gyarados, we're under half our health, meaning either of her Dragonair or even her Kingdra can come in and finish us off. At our current level, no amount of luck in the form of critical hits or misses from her attacks will be enough for us to make it through. But there is one thing we can do. Blackthorn City is the home of the Move Reminder, and one of the things Cherry can remember is the Elemental Fangs. And with Heart Scales being attainable through the Rock Smash strategy we used earlier in the run, we're able to reach each Thunderfang. This allows us to go from 2-shotting Gyarados with Return to 1-shotting it with our new Electric move, albeit not super reliably. While this is a step forward, it's still very clear that Cherry isn't strong enough to make it through this fight, so I decide to level up to 55 before trying again. While my next several attempts at beating Claire all end in defeat, I did learn a few things in the process. Before, when I would knock out Gyarados, she would usually bring in Dragonair. However, at this point, Claire, without fail, always brings in Kingdra. What I gathered from this is that Cherry probably outspeeds her Dragonair now, and it turns out I was right, as on my first attempt where I knock out her Kingdra, sure enough, Cherry is faster. Granted, I missed my attack thanks to Kingdra spamming Smokescreen, but I now know that if I can make it past Kingdra, there's a chance. Keyword being chance. While Cherry does outspeed Dragonair, Return isn't a consistent knockout, and if we fail to KO it, we're likely going to get hit with a Thunder Wave, which can easily screw us over. Now you might be thinking, just use a Cherry or Lumberry. And I would, but if we're not holding the Silk Scarf, we definitely can't one-shot Dragonair. And all this goes without saying that Kingdra itself is the biggest pain to get past. While we deal over half her health with Return, her Citrus Berry means we can't quite 2-hit KO Kingdra, especially since we knock her into red health, allowing her to heal Kingdra. And with all the turns she has available throughout this process, we essentially have to get lucky with a Hydro Pump miss, or hope Claire opts for the Smokescreen strategy in order to even get to her Dragonair. In which case, like before, all those Smokescreens could cause us to miss. With all of this information, along with the many failed attempts, I decide that the best course of action is to level up one more time. Now we're at level 56, and while there are still several attempts that end poorly for us, I eventually get one match where Kingdra's first attack is Smokescreen. Not only that, it follows up with Hydro Pump that ends up missing. At this point, she heals Kingdra with a Hyper Potion, as we're luckily able to see past the smoke and land another return. Then, for the first time in over an hour of attempts, Kingdra goes for Hyper Beam. We live the attack on 33 HP, and as to be expected, we miss our return. But due to Hyper Beam's required recharge, we can safely get off another return, taking out the Kingdra. At this point, all we can do is hope Cherry not only hits 2 returns against her 2 Dragonair, but that they do enough damage to knock them out. The first one comes in, and we're able to land a critical hit. Did it matter? Maybe. I don't care if it did. I've been doing this for over an hour. And as she sends in her final Dragonair, I am praying that Cherry can end my suffering. We go for return, it lands, and it knocks out the Dragonair. When this happened, I quite literally jumped out of my chair and ran around the room. Our little bulldog that could overcame the odds and beat Claire, earning us the Rising Badge. Or at least we would have, but Claire has to be a little bitch and throw a tantrum worse than Whitney did, forcing us to go to the Dragon's Den. We're still able to get the badge, of course, but god damn it do I hate Claire. But now, the past is behind us, and we're able to move on from this hellish 8th gym. From here we head back to our hometown, obtain the Master Ball from Professor Elm, and make our way back to Ecruteak City to take on the Kimono Girls. And while not nearly as difficult as Claire, they actually gave me a bit of trouble. The biggest problem is that there's no break in between fights, and it's very easy to get whittled down over the battles. Umbreon can confuse you, Espeon outspeeds and deals a crap ton of damage with Psychic, Flareon is actually the easy one, Jolteon outspeeds and deals a slightly less crap ton with Thunderbolt, and after all of that, Vaporeon can live your attack on a sliver of HP and knock you out with Surf. It didn't take too long to get past them, but boy is it annoying to make it all the way to Vaporeon just to barely miss the KO and die to a critical hit Surf. But after making it past the Kimono Girls, we scale Bell Tower, watch them do a little dance, knock out this weird looking rooster, and set our sights on the Pokemon League. It's a pretty easy journey all the way to Victory Road, and our last hurdle before the Elite Four and Champion is our final rival fight against Catcher. And everything I mentioned about the rival last time continues to be true here. Golbat can confuse us, Typhlosion can burn us and lower accuracy, and we can be whittled down enough by the time we get to Kadabra that we're knocked out by Psybeam. But after a few attempts and not getting any abysmal luck, we're able to make it past Catcher, stop Cherry from evolving yet again, and start prepping for the Elite Four. First on the list is to finalize our moveset. Like I said earlier, Return is our best move, so we're obviously keeping it. Second is Crunch. We learned this back when Cherry hit level 49, and it'll be very helpful for getting past Will's Psychic types, as well as Karen's Gengar. From here, we head back to the move tutor in Blackthorn to teach Cherry Ice Fang over Thunder Fang, in preparation for Lance's 3 Dragonite, all of which are totally legal. While it would be nice to have Thunder Fang for his Gyarados, our last move slot is actually going to be taken up by Earthquake, which we picked up on Victory Road. With our new and improved moveset and with a few helpful items in our bag, we head into the Elite Four with our level 62 Snubbull. Will it be enough? Only one way to find out. The first Elite Four member is Will, the Psychic type user. He starts off the fight with Xatu. He goes straight for a Me first, which in turn has him go for Crunch, doing very little to Cherry. Thankfully, our Crunch is able to knock him out in one hit. Next in is Jinx, and while he does go straight for Lovely Kiss to put us to sleep, we're luckily able to dodge and knock her out with a Crunch as well. Next in is Exeggutor, and thankfully, Cherry actually outspeeds. Unfortunately, it lives the hit in the red and goes for Reflect, cutting our damage in half for the next few turns. After Will heals Exeggutor and a couple more crunches from Cherry, we bring it down to the red again as Exeggutor unfortunately lands a Hypnosis. But, thanks to proper planning, also known as a Lumberry, Cherry wakes right up, and with one more crunch, we're done with Exeggutor and on to Slowbro. Since Reflect is still active, our crunch ends up doing well under half as Slowbro follows up with a Curse. By this point, the Reflect finally wears off, and while it does live our next crunch, Will is far too focused on setting up with Curse, allowing us to get past Slowbro and onto his final Pokemon, a second Xatu. Really, dude? 2 Xatu? While we are outsped and hit with a Confuse Ray, Cherry decides to not hit herself in confusion, and finishes up the fight with one more crunch, making it to level 63. And you know what that means. We have to stop Cherry from evolving. Again. Next up is Koga. Before jumping into the fight, I used the 3 rare candies in our inventory to level up Cherry to 66, for reasons I'll explain in a bit. Our battle with Koga starts with him sending an area dose, which I have to say, pretty weak start there, bud. We make quick work of this spider with a single attack, and then we move on to Forretress. We do just under half his health with an Earthquake, but thankfully the best attack he has to hit us with is Swift. After a bit of back and forth with Forretress using Protect, and Cherry going for Crunch, that way he isn't knocked into healing range, we're able to get past the Bagworm Pokemon while still at a decent amount of health. Next up is his Muck, which just sounds so gross. Thankfully we're able to outspeed and one-shot it with another Earthquake. His second to last Pokemon is Venomoth, and he decides to go straight for a Psychic. And look, I know it's a Venomoth, but I'm really surprised it didn't do more damage. Meanwhile, I'm kind of surprised at the damage we do, as Cherry one-shots it with Return. Last in is his Crobat, and I'll spoil the surprise now, we're able to knock it out with 2 attacks and win the fight. But I want to take a moment to ask a question. Is it weird to anybody else that Koga doesn't use Weezing? I know it's not an amazing Pokemon, but it's his ace Pokemon in the Kanto games, so you'd think he'd use it here too, right? I mean, Forretress isn't even a poison type, yet it made the cut over Weezing? I just find this weird. Anyways, with Ninja Daddy Koga out of the way, we're on to everybody's favorite Elite Four genius, Bruno. And this fight is the reason I used those rare candies earlier. My trial run for this fight taught me that a lot of Bruno's Pokemon are arranged to knock out with Return, even with Cherry holding the Silk Scarf. But with these extra few levels, we're in a much better position to one-shot his team. Bruno leads off with Hitmontop, which thankfully has Technician for an ability, not Intimidate. We're able to outspeed and knock it out with a Return. He brings in his Hitmonlee next, and it turns out that everything I just mentioned about Bruno's Pokemon being arranged doesn't matter anymore, because Hitmonlee goes for Swagger, doubling our attack stat, and at this point we'll one-shot everything so long as Cherry doesn't smack herself in the process. And thankfully, we actually get some good luck, because Cherry not only lands the attack on Hitmonlee, but snaps out of confusion on Machamp, and knocks it out as well. At this point he sends in Onix, which, it's Onix, it was doomed from the start, and last in is Hitmonchan, which is an easy knockout. But even if it wasn't, it doesn't even know a fighting move. Oh, Bruno, always proving himself to be the worst member of any Elite Four he's a part of. Last before the champion is Karen, who is canonically 25 to 26 years old. Do with that information what you will. She leads off with Umbreon, which survives our return and goes straight for a double team. Oh joy. Since she lived in the red, she goes for a full restore as we end up hitting it with another return. And here we'll take a quick pause. Karen has a Gengar in the back, and it's a massive threat to us, most notably because it has Focus Blast. Sometimes in my initial attempts, Karen would make the wild play of switching into Gengar to be immune to Return. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly what she does here. But because of those earlier attempts, I anticipated it, and as she brings in Gengar, I go straight for Crunch, knocking it out in one hit. Next in is Houndoom, which apparently has no respect for Cherry as it sets up a nasty plot in our face. We show her who's really top dog as we OHKO it with an Earthquake. Next in is her Vileplume, which is an easy one-shot with Return. And the same goes for her next Pokemon, Murkrow. You know, I'm aware there aren't that many dark types in Johto, but Murkrow? I feel like her team could have been better. By this point, all she has left is her weakened Umbreon, which spells out an easy victory for Cherry. And that's the last time you'll hear me say the word easy for a while, because Lance is anything but. In fact, I would rather go back and face Claire's team again than deal with this craziness. The issues are numerous. For one, just like with Claire, we're immediately at 2/3 our attack stat thanks to Gyarados' Intimidate. Why didn't I just do Gold and Silver before abilities were introduced? As if that didn't already make things difficult, at our current level, everything outspeeds us. And almost every move they can go for will deal a ton of damage, or put us at a further disadvantage like Thunder Wave from Dragonite. But we can barely worry about that because it's a struggle to get past Gyarados. We can't even reliably two-shot it with Return, and that's with the Silk Scarf equipped. But if we're holding that, then we can't hold a Lumberry for the potential paralysis from Dragonite. Speaking of Dragonite, we can't even one-shot them with the 4 times effective Ice Fang. All of this brings me to the simple point of, we're nowhere near capable of winning this fight where we currently stand. Even with some of the best luck possible, Cherry can't stand up to the onslaught of attacks coming her way by the time we get to Charizard or Aerodactyl. So, what now? I obviously need to level up a bit, but truthfully, I don't think that alone will do the job. So instead, I rack my brain for a bit and decide there's only one thing I can do. Gamble! While you may think I'm doing this as a distraction from my impending doom, there's actually a purpose. Available for purchase at the game corner for 2,000 coins is actually the move that made the Growlithe run possible, Substitute. While we're unable to get the leftovers before the post-game, Substitute alone might be enough to make the difference. Well, that and several more levels, because trust me, we need them. With our new TM in hand and extra levels under our belt, we make our way back to the Elite Four and give it another go. I'm not going to bother showing the Elite Four again because I'm currently on page 11 of this script, and we don't need to waste any more time than I already have. It's worth noting that I went through the Elite Four with our moveset as it was and taught Substitute right before facing Lance in place of Crunch. While Earthquake literally serves no purpose in this fight, we can always reteach Crunch with a heart scale, but this is the only Earthquake we're gonna get. In addition, I decided to trade out our Silk Scarf for a brand new item, the Never Melt Ice. With the extra levels we've gained, Return does enough damage for us to reliably two-shot Gyarados, but we still need a little extra oomph to one-shot his Dragonites. So with all this prep out of the way, let's see how it goes. We enter the fight with Lance at level 75, and while part of the reason for getting to this level was because of damage, being at this level allows us to finally outspeed Gyarados. Not only that, thanks to his attack being lowered from our Intimidate, Lance opts for Dragon Pulse over any other move, which wouldn't you know, does under a quarter of our HP. Because of this, after going for Return on turn 1, we can follow up with a Substitute, which doesn't get broken from his next attack, meaning we can reliably get past Gyarados with a Substitute up. Next up is one of his level 49 Dragonites. Unfortunately, we're still a bit too slow to outspeed him, but thanks to Dragon Rush's terrible accuracy, we're able to dodge his attack and follow up with an Ice Fang, which is just barely able to knock him out, thanks in large part to the Never Melt Ice. Then comes in his level 50 Dragonite, and wouldn't you know, despite being a level higher, this one is slower than us. But unfortunately that level does come into play as this Dragonite survives Ice Fang on a sliver and heals up with a Citrus Berry. But luckily Lance is an idiot and goes for Safeguard, allowing us to finish it off the next turn. Substitute still intact. Next up is, wow, another Dragonite, who would have guessed? Being the ideal blend of the prior two, we're able to both outspeed and one-shot this Dragonite with another Ice Fang. And at this point, there's just 2 more remaining, Charizard and Aerodactyl. First up is Charizard, and unfortunately our Substitute finally gets broken from Air Slash, as we do over half to him with a Return. Another Air Slash brings us down to 50 HP, and we avoid the flinch, knocking out Charizard with another attack. And at this point, all that's standing between us and victory is Aerodactyl. He goes straight for a Rock Slide, but we survive the hit on 7 HP. We go for an Ice Fang, and it just barely misses out on the KO. At this point, he just needs to attack, and we're done for. But Lance doesn't do that. You know what he does? He heals Aerodactyl. Not once, not twice, but 4 times. He could have just won, but instead he feels the need to embarrass us, even though we came to fight his OP-ass team with just a pink Bulldog. Well, you know what, Lance? Yeah, how does it feel, rude ass? Oh, what, he can heal 4 times, but I can't heal once? I'm using a Snubbull for God's sake. And well, with that said, we win the fight. But I guess I do feel like it's a bit of a hollow victory. I guess there's only one thing left to do. Time for Kanto, baby! Red, I'm coming for ya! Now admittedly, Kanto is pretty boring for a playthrough like this, so we'll quickly speedrun through the gym leaders and I'll rate them from 1 to 10 based on how difficult they are. First up, Surge. While a lot of his team does outspeed us and whittle us down over the battle, as long as there's not terrible luck with Raichu spamming double team, Cherry can get through the fight fairly easily, as long as we don't take too much damage. Overall, I give Surge a 4 out of 10. Second is Sabrina. Even though she only has 3 Pokemon, each of them outspeeds us and can do a ton of damage with their strong psychic attacks. In fact, you need to hope that at least one of her Pokemon will go for a non-attacking move, otherwise you're almost destined to faint. But with each of her team members having multiple status moves, this is fairly likely to happen. That said, she's still more of a challenge than Surge, so 6 out of 10. 6.5 out of 10, just because she uses Espeon. Will, take notes. Third is Erica. While her Jumpluff was constantly switching in and out with U-turn, none of her Pokemon were that difficult in the slightest. Although I will give praise to Tangela for living a return despite us being almost 30 levels above it. So for that display alone, 2 out of 10. Fourth is Misty. While I wouldn't necessarily call her difficult, she does have a few things you need to watch out for. Lapras can survive return and deal a bit of damage, and Starmie outspeeds and can land a Confuse Ray, which if you get the worst luck imaginable like I did, can definitely ruin the fight. But with that being said, a Lumberry would prevent this from being an issue in the first place, in which case the fight overall isn't that bad. So with that all said, 4 out of 10. Or maybe 7 out of 10, too much water? Fifth is Janine, and it's Janine, 0 out of 10. In fact, the only reason I'm even still talking about her is so you can see a bit of the fight. So yeah, I hope you're having a good day. Sixth is Brock. 5 Pokemon, 5 Earthquakes. Maybe he would be a bit more challenging if he wasn't using both a Graveler and a Rhyhorn. Seriously dude, this is the post game. It's okay for you to fully evolve your Pokemon. Another 0 out of 10. Seventh is Blaine, and while he's the same story as Brock in terms of spamming Earthquake, at the very least his final Pokemon Rapidash outsped us and dealt over half our health with an Overheat, so I can't hate on him entirely. 2 out of 10. Last is Blue, easily the most difficult of any of the Kanto gym leaders, which is why you have to face him last. Because of the variety, higher levels, and Intimidate users on his team, Blue is the only gym leader I actually had to implement some strategy against, also known as Substitute. But by this point, we've actually acquired the most helpful item possible, Leftovers. With a combo that helped Growlithe out in our last run, along with a minor bit of strategy in timing our subs, Blue isn't too bad to get past. I mean, we're also level 93, so that definitely helps. To show respect to Blue, I'll give him an 8.7 out of 10, which is IMDb's rating for the original Pokemon Blue. So that's cool. Oh, also, we had to stop Cherry from evolving again, in case anyone was wondering. With all the Kanto gym leaders done for, it's finally time to face the ultimate trainer. We scale Mount Silver, walk the snowy path, and face the hardest trainer with nothing but a level 95 Snubbull by our side. Let's go. Yeah, this isn't happening. I hate to disappoint, but even if I got to level 100, there's no way this is happening without me using full restores constantly. Even if Cherry becomes a Grand Bull, there's just no shot. So what now?
Elite Four rematches.
I'm really putting my all into this video, so be sure to like and subscribe. My dog and I would both appreciate it. To prep for the rematches, I reteach Crunch with a heart scale, and grab another return TM from the Celadon department store. With that done, here's our moveset going in. Substitute, Crunch, Earthquake, Ice Fang. We need certain moves for certain members, and so funny enough, we actually delete our strongest attack for the time being. With that said, now 13 pages into this script, it's time for the actual final stretch. First is Will, and he leads off with Bronzong. I take this opportunity to set up a substitute as it will be very necessary for his next Mon. Bronzong goes straight for Reflect, and we end up having a bit of back and forth for a while. We basically need to get past it with a substitute up without Reflect being on the field. And while this does require a lot of 3D chess, we're eventually able to make it happen, with Cherry protected as he brings in Gardevoir. Even though Gardevoir traces our Intimidate, thanks to the sub being up, our attack isn't actually lowered. Not only this, but as she goes for Focus Blast, our sub ends up taking the hit, and we knock her out with a Crunch on the following turn. Thank goodness Gardevoir's not Fairy type yet. Jinx comes in next, and luckily misses a Blizzard, allowing us to OHKO it with a Crunch as well. Grumpig comes in, and really, Will, a Grumpig, you clearly weren't listening to me. And it leaves as quickly as it entered with a Crunch. Slowbro is up next, and despite living our attack, he fittingly goes for Amnesia. He has no idea what the hell's going on. With one more Crunch, it goes down. Last in is Xatu, and while it does outspeed and go for a Psychic, our leftovers have been slowly healing us over the battle, allowing us to live it and knock it out. 1 down, 4 to go. And now that we're done with the Psychic types, we use our return TM and teach it over Crunch. Koga's up next, and he leads off with Skuntank. He goes straight for Dig, which is a great opportunity to remind you that Earthquake hits opponents using Dig. Idiot. Toxicroak comes in next, and to my surprise, we actually outspeed, and we one-shot it with another Earthquake. Then comes Swalot, and you won't believe it. Earthquake one-shots. Okay, so maybe you would believe it. Venomoth is in next, and even though it outspeeds us and hits us with a Psychic, it really doesn't do that much damage, and we take it out with a return. Next in is Crobat, who wastes his time by going for Mean Look as I set up a substitute. Then we have a fun game of wasting turns between Fly, Koga healing, another Fly, me setting up a sub. Yeah, I think you'll get the idea. After some back and forth, we end up knocking it out, leaving just a sludgy pile of goop, which faints to an Earthquake. Dang, if only Koga had a Weezing that's immune to Earthquake. Oh well. Oh, and I'm sorry, I almost forgot. We stopped Cherry from evolving. Bruno is up next, and I actually have to give him some credit for once, because he's not a completely free fight like you might expect him to be. While all 3 of his Hitmons are a simple one-shot, his last 3 Pokemon require a bit of good luck. Both his Hariyama and Machamp are ranges, and Lucario outspeeds us, which can potentially obliterate us with close combat if we've taken basically any damage prior. While Hariyama lives our return, it goes for Low Kick, which does very little damage thanks to Cherry weighing 17 pounds. Also, really Bruno? Kicking dogs? What a piece of shit. Machamp is in next, and we're luckily able to get the damage range on it, otherwise we would have taken a dynamic punch directly to the face. Last in is Lucario, and while he is able to get off a close combat, Cherry tanks the hit like a beast, and we knock it out with an Earthquake, walking away from this fight with a victory. Last in the Elite Four is the baddie herself, Karen. She leads off with Weavile. Thanks to our Intimidate, this is the perfect Pokemon to set up a substitute against. Unfortunately, we get some pretty bad luck turn 1 as Weavile crits us with an Ice Punch, but we're left with enough HP to still set up our substitute, and it stays intact as she uses her next Ice Punch, and we knock her out with a return. Absol is next, great choice Karen, and despite going for a Detect to stall us out a bit, the following turn we outspeed and knock it out with another return. Houndoom is next, and while she is able to break our sub with Flamethrower, Earthquake is more than enough to send this pup packing. Next in is Spiritomb, which based on its moveset is the perfect thing to set up another sub against. Once we do, Spiritomb can't really do much to us, and we're able to land a couple of Earthquakes, knocking it out, allowing us to move on to Honchkrow. Thankfully, this Mafia bird is an easy one-shot with return, leaving us with our last Pokemon, Umbreon. And no joke, it's actually the most threatening Mon on her team for one reason: Curse. See, with Umbreon's Citrus Berry and Karen using full restores, Umbreon is able to slowly but surely build up its defenses. And without a lucky crit, it can easily spell disaster for us, especially because it can move first and deal a ton of damage at any point with Sucker Punch. There is a lot of back and forth between us dealing damage, Umbreon boosting its stats, and Karen using full restores, but with enough careful play, we're able to come out on top, finishing our fights against the Elite Four. And of course, say it with me now, we stop Cherry from evolving again. And now that we're down to just Lance, I have some bad news. Cherry can't quite cut it. Not only are we immediately stunted due to his lead Salamence's Intimidate, but just like our initial fight with Lance, we're outsped by the majority of his team and miss out on many important ranges even with the Nevermelt Ice equipped. Even with substitute strats, there just isn't anything we can do. So it looks like this might be the end of the line for Cherry. Or is it? This entire video I've been pestering y'all by constantly mentioning how we have to stop Cherry from evolving, and you know what? After all of this, I think it's finally time to stop getting in her way. We use our last rare candy, level up Cherry to 99, and finally let her evolve into Granbull. She's earned it. Cherry, let's end this. While Salamence still outspeeds us, thanks to the added bulk from evolving, Cherry takes less than a quarter from his Flamethrower, which allows us to set up a substitute and keep it intact after the following attack, as we knock out Salamence with an Ice Fang. Lance's Dragonite comes in next, and now that we're evolved, we outspeed. Unfortunately, Ice Fang is just a bit shy of knocking Dragonite out, but the gods smile down upon us as we freeze it. And since it doesn't thaw out, we're able to follow it up with another Ice Fang, taking it out. Next in is Garchomp, which goes straight for an Outrage. While it does break our sub, and even lives our Ice Fang, thanks to all the HP we've recovered from our leftovers, we're able to survive its next Outrage comfortably and take it out on the following turn. Altaria's up next, and not wanting to mess around, I go straight for an Ice Fang, taking it out in one hit. Charizard is up next and hits us with a Flamethrower, doing a big chunk of damage, as our return leaves it in the red. And it turns out, this is just what we needed. With Lance's Charizard low in HP, he decides to start using full restores, and for a few turns, we get caught in this consistent cycle. Normally this would be really annoying, but it actually allows us to slowly gain back HP with our leftovers. And by the time Lance is done healing, even though Charizard goes for Hyper Beam, we've gained enough health back to live the attack pretty decently. And with Charizard finally going down, all that stands between us and victory is Gyarados.
Oh boy, another Intimidate.
Knowing Gyarados has 2 status moves, I make the bold play and go for a substitute. And thanks to Lance's greed of trying to paralyze me, it pays off. We go for return, and it does just over half, as Gyarados goes for Waterfall, which doesn't break our sub. And with one final return, Cherry takes out the Gyarados, and shows Lance once and for all that she is truly top dog. This is by far the longest video I've ever made, and you know what? It was a ton of fun. I'm guessing you agree, since you've made it this far. What was your favorite moment in this playthrough? Be sure to let me know in the comments. And with all that said, after a 15-page script, I need to take a breather. So for now, as thanks for making it to the end of this very long video, here's a picture of my dog. Talk to y'all soon.